Today I'm going to try out the Svelte JavaScript framework. I've never used it before, so this will be my first impressions of the library and how it works. Before I get started on writing code, I'll need to peruse its website and docs just to see how it works and its benefits and bottlenecks. On its website, Svelte immediately differentiates itself from other frameworks like React and Vue by saying that it focuses on the compile step of building JavaScript apps and not on the browser side. That is, it doesn't focus too much on optimizing UI updates on the browser, especially through the virtual DOM. It does all this on the compile step before the app is loaded on the browser. Let's dive a little bit into what the virtual DOM is and how it works. The virtual DOM is just an object representing how a component should look. Every time the component state updates or it receives new props, the virtual DOM changes to reflect new data. The framework, like React, looks at the old and new changes in the object and applies changes to the real DOM. This should be faster than just modifying or writing the real DOM directly every time something changes. Svelte's view though is that you don't need the virtual DOM to achieve the same goals. The difference with Svelte is that it skips the diffing step altogether because it knows at build time how things should change in your app and does not wait for component changes at runtime to do the diffing work. This makes it faster and more efficient than React or other frameworks because they'll always have the extra overhead of having to calculate diffs every time a component changes. This doesn't mean that the virtual DOM is slow. The React diffing algorithm is crazy fast and is rarely a performance bottleneck to your apps. It allows developers to build their apps without thinking about performance of the app because React takes care of it for them. This is true especially for me because I never bothered to know about the virtual DOM and diffing algorithms by the React compiler till today when it was mentioned in the Svelte docs. React does a great job of keeping me focused on getting things done and not on the internals. I'm going to go ahead and try to set up Svelte. I'll go through a subset of the features with you so I can get acquainted with how they do things. To get started, you need to install the Svelte template locally using npx digit svelte.js template command with the folder you want to install. Digit is just an npm tool to download specific folders of a repository without downloading the full repository like git clone does. Let's then cd into the directory and npm install dependencies. We then start the dev server by running npm run dev. We can then open the browser and navigate to localhost 8080. You should see hello world on your screen. In the newly created folder under the src directory, notice that Svelte components have a .svelte extension. If you are on VS Code and you open app.svelte, it looks a little weird because there's no syntax highlighting. So make sure to install the Svelte for VS Code extension. Also, in the new component, we see that a Svelte component has three main sections: the script tag for your JS code, the main tag for the HTML tags, and the style tags for the CSS. In the main.js file, we see that's where app.svelte file is initialized with some props. The app is served from the public directory where we can see the build files in the build directory and the index.html file, which is the entry point for the app in the browser. The three sections are not a requirement for your apps though. Let's start this component from a clean slate by removing everything from the file. We can start our empty component by printing a simple message in a h1 tag. You should see a message in your browser. To add data to our component, we just add a script tag and declare a variable like normal JavaScript. We can then use this variable directly in our HTML file by wrapping it in curly braces and it will be reflected in the browser. The curly braces can also contain real JavaScript code, so you can access variable type attributes like to uppercase string method for example. You can also add style tags to style your component element. These style tags are scoped to the component and do not affect other components outside of this file. You can also import other components into your components just like you would a React app. These imports will be within the script tags. For example, let's get a simple footer component for the app. We can then import it into app.svelte and use it in the body of our component. We use JSX syntax for this. The footer will now show up in our browser screen. Remember dangerously set inner HTML from React. In Svelte, use the special @HTML tag. To test this, we can declare a string containing HTML text as its value and then add it to the main section using the special tag. The text will now be rendered as HTML on screen. Reactivity in JavaScript frameworks means changes in application state are reflected in the DOM. The DOM is always in sync with your state. For example, in this button counter, we add an event handler that increments the count variable every time a button is clicked. The print value will be in sync with the count value as the button is clicked. If we have variables that depend on other state variables and we want them to be updated if state variables change, we use reactive declarations. They are denoted by a $ followed by a colon. For example, we can declare a double variable here whose variable is the count variable multiplied by 2. Every time count changes, our double variable also changes, so it's always up to date with the latest value of count. Reactive declarations can be used in block formats, if statements, or even console.log statements. To declare props, we use the export late keyword in the component. We then use that variable name as the prop key when passing in props. Children in Svelte work differently than React. In Svelte, they are called slots. So if a component wants to accept children, you add a slot tag to the position you want the children to be, and then you can wrap the children with the component. The parent component will automatically place the child you provided to the slot tag. Svelte has a lot of features that we won't cover in this video. There's still loops, await blocks, DOM events, bindings, and many more. Please feel free to check out their tutorial site, which is just brilliant and resourceful for newbies and experts alike. My first impressions of the framework is I was a bit amazed by the simplicity. Just adding script, CSS, and HTML tags and everything works without further configuration was amazing to me. I was taken aback by the syntax though. It is valid JavaScript, but I've never seen it used like this before, especially the reactive declarations. Also, component props are a bit weird. Svelte acknowledges this and urges you to continue to keep an open mind on these new syntaxes, and they'll pay off at the end. As a dev coming from a React background, I'm not so much in protest to these new ways of writing JavaScript, because the magic parts of the code was also introduced to React hooks, which I came to love in spite of my initial reservations. I encourage you guys to try Svelte and new technologies in general so that you can learn the advantages and misgivings of each of them and make yourself a better developer. Thanks as always for watching, and I hope you learned something new today.